forget all you know about podcasts. We welcome you to an experience uniquely different. Please join us for our coverage of all entertainment on the fringe of society. The candles are lit, the lights are down low. It is now time to welcome our host as he steps up to the pulpit. The sacrifice has been prepared for the midnight black mass.
Hail, defiers of fear, space, death, and time. Welcome to this week's edition of the Midnight Black Mass here at pottyhumor.com. I am your host, the devil you know, the maniacal minister of the occult, Reverend Dan Wilson, here for a very special edition of the program. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here babbling about my opinions because we've got a long interview to get to. The Wildside Chronicles returns, and certainly embodied in this interview is the strong-style psycho Tank is just about to join us here on the program. We recorded this interview live on location at his house. There's a little bit of background noise at times. It was as real got. We were having a good time. Our children were playing in the background. There was dogs barking from time to time. It was certainly interesting, but one of the most fun times I've had conducting an interview here on the Midnight Black Mass, and one of the few I've done on location, so that was kind of cool. The miracles of modern technology never cease to amaze me, but I guess that's just because I'm probably behind the times. But in any event, without further ado, here is our part one of a two-parter, 2-hour-long interview with the strong-style psycho Tank here on the Midnight Black Mass. Do you like comics?
Ew, no.
Well, fuck you. Unlike this dumbass pussy piece of shit, this show's for people who do. Introducing Get Your Pulls. Each and every Friday-ish at www.pottyhumor.com. That's PODDYHUMOR.com. You can also subscribe to us on iTunes and follow us on Twitter at Dragons Rejects and The Great Muji. We will be providing comic coverage for Marvel, DC, Image, Dark Horse, all of the major and independent titles. We'll be looking at our favorites and yours each and every week only on Get Your Pulls.
Get your balls.
And we're back on the Midnight Black Mass, and it is my pleasure to introduce our guest this week with the return of the Wildside Chronicles. As in my opinion, and the opinion of many others, one of the best big men in the sport today, probably the last decade. But don't take my word for it, as he's been one of my dear friends going back for about 13 years now. So maybe I'm a little biased, but certainly wrestling legends like Mr. Wrestling 2, who I heard from his own mouth, said one of the best moving big men he'd ever seen, and he would have drawn a lot of money with him in his day. And mass superstar Demolition Axe Bill Eadie said he was a consummate wrestler, consummate worker, and a real throwback to his generation, and said the same thing. So I think the respect of the peers and the legends that came before, certainly a more valid opinion than mine. But ladies and gentlemen, please welcome, from Wildside fame, IWA-Mid South, Canada, Mexico, all over the Indies, the strong-style psycho Tank.
What's up, Rev?
How's it going? Finally got you on the show. It took long enough.
It's been a long time.
We've been talking about this for a long time and trying to get it set up. Something always seemed to come up. So we take it back to the beginning. I don't have any kind of format. We're not really going specifically. We've got a couple fan questions that came in. We'll get to those here at the end. If this goes super long, we'll just cut it up and have multiple parts. So I'm totally fine with that. But it's the same story that starts every single wrestling interview that I can think of. But why not? Tell us how you got started in professional wrestling. Actually, take it back a little bit further. What were your main influences in wrestling growing up, and what first sucked you in? How did the bug first bite you?
Well, when I was a kid, my dad, he watched wrestling, the Nick Goulas wrestling on Saturday afternoons and the Georgia Championship Saturday nights, and I hated it. I'd be like, I want to watch cartoons. He'd be like, no, sit down and watch this. So I sat down with him one night, and I caught the very end of a Georgia Championship Wrestling episode where the Masked Superstar beat up Wrestling 2 and took his mask off, and the show ended there. So I had to watch it the next week to see what happened, and then the next week, and then the week after that, and then they were coming to the auditorium here in Chattanooga, and I was like, Dad, let's go. And he said, okay, and a big grudge match, Wrestling 2 and Masked Superstar. And I loved every minute of it. But like, also on that card was like, Jack and Jerry Briscoe, Bruiser Brody, Abdullah the Butcher, and come to find out years later how awesome that stuff really was. As a kid, I didn't really take it in as I was just there because I was in awe of how big these guys were. And like, man, I saw this on TV, 2 hours ago. Now I'm right here watching them live.
And it's interesting, I had no idea that Wrestling 2 and Masked Superstar was the first thing that got you, because that was exactly who I quoted in the intro piece there. So that's pretty crazy. You actually have seen like more live wrestling than almost anybody I've met next to Jeff G. Bailey, and you probably have seen as much as him. So you were right here in the thick of Chattanooga. You got to see the end of the Goulas era. You got to see the expansion to Georgia Championship Wrestling and NWA and eventually WCW. What are your favorite memories of that time? Your favorite matches that you saw live?
I remember going to one of the shows. Nick Goulas would bring in Abdullah and Bruiser Brody like once or twice a year. I didn't know they were feuding in Puerto Rico and Texas and Virginia and Oklahoma and Louisiana. It was just like a specialty thing, which as a kid I didn't know. And then watching them just beat the hell out of each other, and I'm, seeing all the blood for the first time was watching Bruiser Brody bleed. And I was just like, him kicking chairs over, and he actually stepped on my foot walking by, and instead of crying like a little girl, I just thought that was the coolest shit ever. But I've seen tons of matches. Tommy Rich, Buzz Sawyer from the Georgia Championship Wrestling days. The Freebirds against the Briscoes against the Road Warriors. And then when I got a little older, we started going to the Omni in Atlanta for their live events, and seeing the Road Warriors against the Midnight Express, and Dusty and Magnum against two of the Horsemen. And it didn't really matter which one it was, but I was always excited just to go. And then when I got older here, I hate to admit it, I was always an NWA guy, but the first time Hogan wrestled here, I was a big time mark, and I had to go see Hulk Hogan wrestle, and it was him and the Ultimate Warrior in a tag match, and I was like, this is pretty cool. But it just wasn't like the old Georgia days, with just 2 or 3 lights over the ring and people in there smoking their Marlboros, and they didn't have no smoking back then. And damn, it was just, you could barely see the ring through all the cigarette smoke, and the old ladies hitting people with their purses, and I was just like, man, this is, I always thought it was real. My dad never told me anything different until I got a little bit older. Cause, up until I was about 11, 12 years old, I was like, I'd be at school talking about wrestling, and that stuff's fake. That's chicken blood. And I was like, bullshit.
Chicken blood, I saw it drip on the ground out of a gaping wound. Are you fucking kidding me?
And then when I got into it, I'm not one to ever come out and say it's fake, because I'll be 43 years old next month, and now every damn bump I take, that shit hurts. So by God, that's not fake. When I gotta I can barely roll out of bed on Sunday mornings or whatever. That's not fake. The torn ligaments in my knee, that's not fake.
No.
The broken ankle, that wasn't fake. countless stitches and tons of super glue on my head. That wasn't fake either.
Yeah, certainly a lot of panache and showbiz and showmanship, but the physicality of it is all too real. And you talk about the abuse that you put yourself through over the years, as any consummate pro does. What year did you start as an active professional?
1996.
And dating back prior to that, you actually had an amateur background.
Yeah, I wrestled in high school at Red Bank High School. I went to a little college in Iowa, wrestled there for a couple of years. Thought I was pretty good when I left here, then went up here and just got the shit beat out of me for 2 years. So I came back home and started drinking again and hitting the bud. And then me and some buddies of mine, we get drunk as shit on Saturday nights and go out in the backyard and beat the hell out of each other, not knowing a damn thing. We just thought we were being funny, and then we kept doing it over and over. We do it every Sunday afternoon. Like, we'd set up little backyard shows. There was only 4 of us. We each had different characters, but we kind of got pretty good at it, you know. So we would watch videos and be like, oh, they're working the left side of the body. Mm-hmm. And they're doing this, they're doing that. And then we, you know, started working little spots, and we ran into this guy. He had a wrestling ring in his parking lot of his karate studio in East Ridge. So we asked him if we could play around in it, and he goes, well, if you fix it up, you can use it all you want. So we fixed it up. And, you know, we ran shows for our few friends. They'd come and watch and hoot and holler and do whatever. And one day, Richie Dye drove by. He was a local guy who had been all over. He wrestled for Goulas and Georgia Championship Wrestling and NWA as an enhancement talent. So, you know.
He's a big guy, too.
Oh, yeah. He got the ring with us and beat the shit out of us and was like, well, you know, if y'all are serious about this, come down to TWA and we'll train this coming Tuesday night. We were like, okay. So 6 of us went, and Richie Dye, Rawhead Rex, and Sam Colt beat our asses for 2 hours. And then I was the only one to go back Thursday. And they were like, well, hell, I guess you're the only one that's going to amount to anything. So Rawhead Rex took me under his wing, taught me the business and how to, you know, the respect level. You know, there was times, you know, that's the problem with a lot of guys now, there's just no respect. You know, they train for 2 or 3 weeks. They've been wrestling 6 months, and goddamn it, they want to go out and train other people.
Yeah, and that's really a problem. Like, there's really too many guys that don't have any qualifications training other people, and it's really lets shittier guys in, and it's just a horrible cycle. It really needs to stop.
And then Rex, you know, I believe I was the only person he ever really trained, and then I kind of took his mentality of the business, and people ask me all the time, hey, can you train me? I was like, no, I don't have the patience for that shit.
Yeah.
And that's how Rex was. You know, and then, like, if I did something wrong, he'd pull me off to the side and try to beat the shit out of me. You know, you need to shake everybody's hand when you walk in, whether you like them or not, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay. And then if I did something stupid in the ring, he'd let me know. And because, like, my first 6 months, I wrestled him every Friday and Saturday from Chatsworth to Dalton to Cleveland, Tennessee to wherever. And then I learned 99% of the whole business from him.
Rex was a tough guy. He's one of the toughest guys in the area. Had quite a reputation as far as that goes. I mean, he's actually the brother of Danny Marlowe, who was another enhancement talent around the Richie Dye era, the same type that traveled around. So he was wrestling in his family, and certainly passed on some of that toughness and some of that attitude to you.
Yeah, he did. I mean, I remember one night we were in a match in Cleveland, and I was, like I said, my first 6 months, I would just let him beat the living shit out of me. You know, 'cause I was afraid to fight back. And then one night we're in the middle of a match, and he goes, brother, you got to fight back. So I hauled off and punched him as hard as I could, and right between the eyes. And he was like, okay, we're even for all the ass whoopings I've given you. Then after that, you know, he started laying low in the business, and I kind of took off. And then, you know, he always said he was proud that, you know, I was his trainee because the way I handled people. And, you know, a lot of people say I used to be a bully or whatever. I don't really consider myself a bully. I consider myself protecting the business.
Yeah, I never ever thought that. A lot of people may have that reputation because you're big and you certainly don't mind imposing your will if the situation comes to it. But, usually you're doing it, like you said, for the good of the business to try to help guys, try to help them understand what's going on, what they've done wrong, and just to run out the assholes that don't belong. That's an old school mentality. Ole Anderson did it. Hiro Matsuda did it. It's not a thing to be taken lightly, when...
It was like the Andersons. They would charge $400 for a tryout, beat the shit out of 7 or 8 people, and then never give them a call back. Al Snow told me a story that he actually came from Lima, Ohio to the Carolinas and paid $400, and they just beat the shit out of him. He was like, we'll give you a call, kid, and never heard from him again. He's like, God damn it. There's $400 out the door there.
Yeah, so you think Tank's tough, or not even say Tank's you think Tank's an asshole. You obviously didn't meet
know
Ole.
assholes.
Yeah, you didn't meet the old timers in that respect. And I met you at TWA, which stands for TriStar Wrestling. I never quite got that acronym, but it's the TriStar Wrestling. It was in Rossville, Georgia at the time. Later moved to Dalton. That's where we met. But you actually did a little bit of traveling around and doing some other shows before then, even.
Yeah, when I started in '96, I mainly did like Chatsworth, Dalton, Cleveland, and Rossville. And in '97, I guess like my first match away from this area, I went to McMinnville, Tennessee to wrestle Gypsy Joe. And they were like, we need you. I was pretty much a babyface wherever I was. And they were like, no, we want you to wear all black and come out with a Nazi flag and a swastika painted on your head, and you're going to be the German Tank. So I was like, okay. So never spoke one word to Gypsy Joe before the match. They just said he's going to chop you a few times, and then he'll tell you when to take it home. So I was like, okay. And Rawhead Rex was there with me. He was like, man, something smells fishy about this. And I was like, that'll be all right. Damn, he's 60 years old. What can he do? So we get out there, and the match is fine. And we're working each other. And I must have chopped him too hard or something. And he chopped me in the throat, and I was kind of like losing my breath and rolled out of the ring. And next thing I know, he hits me in the head with a baseball bat. And I got blood gushing everywhere. So I'm like, what the fuck? So I start going back to the dressing room, and he's following me. I'm like, with a chair. So I'm like, what the hell? So he throws the chair, and I catch it. And I punch him in the face as hard as I can. And I'm 300 pounds. And he's like, harder, motherfucker. I'm like, what? So I hit this dude like 8 or 9 times, swelled his eye completely shut. Blood shooting out of his eye. And he's all like, harder, kid, harder. And Rex grabs me and pulls me in the back. And he's like, man, that some bitch is crazy. So on the way home, I had to go get some 9 staples in my head. I'd been in the wrestling business a year, and I was like, if this is what it's going to be like, fuck it, I'm quitting. Cause I was like, that was bullshit. And got back to Rossville the next week. The story had already been around that I got beat up by Gypsy Joe. So then, back then, the Rossville family was like me and Rick Justice and Rawhead and Bobby Hayes. They were like, fuck that guy. Let's take a trip to Tullahoma and beat the hell out of him. And I was like, nah, it's all right. You learn from your mistakes and you just go with the flow. And Bobby Hayes is like, man, he goes, it happens to all of us. We'll run in with an old timer, get the shit beat out of us. You just got to keep going.
Yeah, that's. I think everybody that's done any time has gotten the hell kicked out of them by an old timer at least once. So,
then I remember starting at TWA, and I'd taken like 9 months off because I'd had to get a real job, and it took up my wrestling time. So when I switched shifts, I could go back to wrestling. So I went to TWA one night, and you and Ace Rockwell and Sean Tempers, I think they were still sitting in the crowd, giving me hell one night. And I was like, these little bastards. And then you were like, you introduced yourself to me. I was like, cool. And then I think somebody was like, that's Gypsy Joe's nephew. I was like, okay. And I think you said you were scared to death that, God damn, he finds out, he's going to whoop my ass.
Oh, I was terrified. Yeah. I didn't know you, and like everybody that does it, I thought, you're this madman that's going to fucking beat the shit out of me. But come to find out, we like hit it off really the first night. We were talking about like music and just different shit that we liked, old time wrestling, and started hanging out pretty regularly after that. I went to Wildside pretty quickly thereafter, and that's where you first made your national appearance, worldwide really, because you know we had that syndication abroad for a little while, and got to be exposed to a lot of different fans through what was NWA Wildside at the time. The NWA is no longer affiliated with that group of promotions anymore, but at least at the time it was NWA Wildside. Before we go, though, you did mention a guy that I do want to talk about, Bobby Hayes. He's just, I mean, like Rick Justice was a great unheralded worker as well. You know, one of those guys that never really got the respect that I didn't say that he deserved, because I don't know. You know, I heard Rick was kind of hard to deal with sometimes. Some people said. I mean, that's not from my personal experience, but he was a hell of a wrestler, and Bobby is just one of those guys to me that like exemplifies everything that's right with a business. He was an old timer that knew how shit went. You know, he wasn't some jackass who was half educated. He was a veteran of the road in the business, and he had no problem taking somebody under their wing and helping them out. And he did that with you. He did it with me. And you know, he's still doing it today. But what are you just some reflections on Bobby and the time you worked against him and with him, and just as a dude?
Bobby Hayes was awesome. When I was at TWA, you know, I was stuck wrestling Rex there for a long time, and then Mad Jack Costello was the booker then, and Rex went to him and was like, you know, we got to give Tank somebody else to wrestle. So they got a hold of Bobby Hayes, and I heard stories from like David Young and Bobby, you know, and Rick Justice. They were, and not ever a one bad word about the guy. It was always about how easy he was to work with and this and that. So they brought him in to work with me, and he was doing this freak gimmick. And he's got that powerful left hand. You know, most people are right-handed, so I'm looking for the punch coming one way, and he's coming from the other side. And after a couple of matches with him, I learned he was left-handed, and we...
Not to lean into that shit.
Not to lean into that shit. And yeah, he was just always awesome. I got a funny story with him. One of the first shows I ever did with him. He's we're in the back getting dressed, and he's all like, "All right, kid, what are we gonna do tonight?" And I'm like, "Whatever you want to do. You know, you're the veteran here." And I look up, and all he's got on is his wrestling boots, knee pads, and a T-shirt. That's it. So there's like 7 inches of Bobby Hayes in my face, and I'm like. And he goes, well, there's one spot I want to do. I just want to get you up for, try to see if I can get you up for a tombstone. You want to practice that back here? And I'm like, no, you don't have any pants on. And he's like, oh, I was fucking with you. And then we went on. And he had this kid, his son named Barron, meanest fucking kid ever, man. And I'd be getting dressed, and he'd run back to slap the shit out of you and take off running. And then you'd find Bobby in the back beating the shit out of him. Telling him, you ain't hanging out back there and picking on everybody. And we went, and Bobby, he would come and go. He'd stick around for a few weeks, and you wouldn't see him for 6 months. And then when TWA moved to Dalton, like I said, I took time off, and I came back, and we did an angle there that when my first night back at TWA, there was about 30 people in the crowd, and then one night he was booked against Monster Man to do a thumbtack match, and he no-showed. So he was like, man, you want to do this match with me? I was like, sure. So we did a thumbtack match. So then he was like, let's just do an angle out of it. So the next week, you know, I beat the shit out of him. He's bleeding all over the place. And then the crowd just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So he's like, hell, we need to do a cage match. So we did the first cage match ever at TWA, an I Quit match, and it was one of my favorite matches of all time. And that match, I believe, was watched by Jeff G. Bailey and Steve Martin, and they were like, we need to get this dude down here.
Yep.
So Bill Behrens, who at the time at Wildside was kind of like, well, he's just a brawler, blah, blah, blah. You know, we don't need him down here. So Dan's like, got me booked on a Friday night show, so I chose Drew Delight to go with me because I knew he would bump his ass off for me. And I wrestled, no punching, no kicking. It was a straight-up wrestling match. And Steve Martin was like, Man, that was awesome. You know, you did the Foley elbow from the apron to the floor, and I did it 3 times, and I got the spot, and I was like, fuck it, I ain't doing that no more. That shit hurts. And I had a little blue bag. It had a sickle in it, and he was like, man, we got to get you down here. But Bill was still kind of like, I don't know, and he's just a brawler. And at the time, there was a bunch of little guys, and then you had Scotty Wren, Stone Mountain, Justice.
Later Abyss, for those.
Later Abyss, the Cole twins. And you had some pretty big guys, but you had a lot more little guys. You did big guys. And at the time, I was about 275. I'd lost a lot of weight. And
yeah, that was the period I like to refer to as Stone Cold Tank.
yeah,
You were skinnier than I'd ever seen you, and you shaved your beard and just had a handlebar mustache.
it had a handlebar mustache, and I looked like a big queer. But it was pretty funny. And then, so I got the call from Bill. It was like, we want you to come to the next TV, bring Drew, y'all do y'all's little match. We did pretty much the same match. And Bill, I'm leaving. He's like, well, I'll let you know something if we can use you. And I was hoping me and Drew would both get in together, because me and Drew, we've always been pretty tight. So I was kind of hoping we'd both get the call. But then that Monday, Dan called and was like, well, you're booked on the next TV. I was like, cool. And the rest was history. I was there from 2001 to 2007. Every show. You drive 4 hours for a run-in. Thanks, Bill.
That's the breaks when you're doing TV.
Oh, man. Yeah, and if you're in this business to make money, you're in the wrong goddamn business.
Yeah, because especially now, I think had we got in 10, 15 years earlier, we would have probably made a little bit of money. But unfortunately now it's feast or famine. So it's not. If you're in that top tiny percent, then you have all the money. And if you're like slubs on the indies like us, you get what you can. And it's not like all hot dogs and a Coke. Like sometimes you get great payoffs, but it's just so up and down, and you never know what's going to happen,
Yeah, I went to Florida by myself. Nobody else went with me because this guy had seen me on some website. This was before YouTube, and I guess it was a TWA results show, and it was me and Bobby, and he was like, you want to come to Florida? And I was like, sure. Nobody else wanted to go. Nobody else got booked. So I drove like 9 hours of Florida and got $10, 2 Cokes, a hot dog, and a T-shirt that didn't even fucking fit me. No hotel money, no nothing. I'm like, damn, this sucks. That was like my first venture out, going far off with Florida, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this shit. And then Wildside was like 3 weeks after that, so I was like, this is cool. But, I'd heard, there ain't no pay down there, but it's the experience of working like a TV show. It's like, you do a regular indie show, you don't have a hard cam. You got to learn how to work toward the hard cam and how to interact with the crowd. Yeah, know when to take it home when they fucking tell you to. Not like indie shows I go to. And I was at one a couple weeks ago. I was going to double shot. And the first match went like 35 fucking minutes. And I was almost to the point I was going to be the old Tank, just do a run in and beat the shit out of them. And then start my match so I get the hell out of there. But, man, I learned a lot at Wildside. Especially I actually learned how to work. It was like, you ain't got to be all stiff and hardcore no more. That came a little bit later on when they brought Iceberg in. And they teamed me with White Trash. Trash was the talker. I was the guy that could work. I love Trash to death, but he couldn't work for shit. He'd hit you with a stop sign and knock you out, do whatever, and I just kind of drop you on your head right after that. And did a little angle with Blackout. Can I tell the New Jack story?
Tell any story you'd like, man. It's all on you, brother.
Trash had gotten hurt, and we dropped the tag belts, I believe. And Bill called me and was like, Murder One can't make it, or Homicide at the time couldn't make it, and we're going to throw New Jack in the spot. Are you worried about that? And I'm like, no, not really. I think it'd be cool. I was a New Jack mark from ECW, so it was like my first real name that I ever worked. So I was happy as a Fort Dick dog at the time. We get out there, and I'm teaming with Rusty Riddle and Sean Royal. What the hell was Total Destruction?
Total Destruction, and big guys, tough guys. Sean Royal was one half of the new breed in the 80s. He was talking about Hiro Matsuda.
So you know he got the fuck beat out.
Yeah, those guys were like severe badasses.
So we do the match, New Jack's all like, you gonna get the color for me? I was like, yeah. So we do the shit, and he's cutting a promo. Look at this pig, I'm making him bleed, blah, blah, blah. End of the match. Well, Sean Royal grabs the microphone, and that's when I'm laying there like, what? This wasn't in the script. And he goes, all right, my nig. And I'm like, oh, shit. I'm like, okay, here, he didn't say the whole word, but he said the NIG, and that was enough. So New Jack comes back out with the guys he teamed with, which was Rain Man and Cross. And me and Rain Man had gotten pretty tight at the time, so I just grabbed him, and we just rolled around on the floor while they did their deal, and we get out back. Me and New Jack are talking, and he's like, dang, you did good, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, thank you. And Rusty walks up, like, man, what's your problem? And New Jack's, what's your problem? And I'd heard all the New Jack stories, him shooting people and stabbing people, and he's a legit badass. But when he punched Rusty Riddle in the face, and Rusty Riddle didn't go down, and he just looked at him, and then they started rolling around, me and Adam Jacobs were hiding behind a dumpster, looking out the side like two little bitches. And Onyx broke the fight up by itself, and nobody else wanted to go over there and get involved in that shit. And that was one good Wildside story there.
Oh, yeah.
That's shitload of me and Iceberg, they came in. We feuded for a long time, and we were just like, Bill, the hell with this, team us up. So he teamed us up, and then we were like the modern day fat road warriors or something. And they brought in the Brown brothers from Texas. You remember them?
I remember this story. I know where this one's going.
Iceberg liked to have a few alcoholic beverages before matches.
He likes cocktails.
About 19 or 20 of them. So he's drunk as hell. And he don't want to call shit with these guys. And I'm like, man, we got to call something. And he's like, fuck them. We're just going to road warriors their ass. We're going to hit the ring, beat shit out of them, and then send them back to Texas. And I was like, okay. Well, they came there trying to talk to us. And Iceberg's like, we'll just call it in the ring. I step outside, and they got Jerry Palmer off to the side. And they're like, sorry, the real big guy, Iceberg, he's intoxicated. We don't feel safe. And Jerry Palmer goes, it ain't the drunk Iceberg you got to worry about. It's the sober tank you got to worry about. And they're like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, that's the thing. Iceberg, I mean, he certainly can rough a motherfucker up and has on occasion, but he's really like a big pillow, Like the only time Iceberg ever really fucked me up was splashing me off the top rope one time, and he about fucking killed me. But other than that, like dropping elbows and splashes, it always felt like a giant pillow landing on you.
Yeah, I was the main one of the two. And we went out there, and one of the Brown brothers tried to shoot in on me like a single leg, and I caught him with a knee under the chin and knocked him out. So I'm like, shit, what are we going to do with this dead motherfucker? Iceberg's like, tag me in. So I tagged him in, and we did a spot where I would suplex Iceberg onto a prone body. Well, this guy's already knocked out. So I go to suplex him, and Berg does not jump whatsoever. So I DDT Iceberg's head into this guy's head. So I knocked him out, woke him up, and knocked him out again. And then I think one of us just pinned him, and that was the end of the match. And they got their shit and left in their gear.
Ouch.
There was another match with Iceberg, and he was drunk again. And somewhere in Griffin, Georgia, at a bar. And this one guy dead weighted Iceberg, so he's like, let's kill this motherfucker. So I came in with a running knee. Bam, he's knocked out. He's hanging out of the ring. I pull him back in. I slap him a little bit. He wakes up, and here comes Iceberg with a mafia kick. Bam, he's knocked out again. I'm like, God damn. And his partner's like, hell with this. He just walked off. So I'm like, well, poor guy. We're getting it back. I'm like, everything okay? I don't remember anything. I was like, good.
Let's keep it that way.
But at Wildside, I mean, I did a few singles matches. I was mainly in like tags. First I tagged up with White Trash. We won the tag belts. Tagged up with Bulldog Reigns. That was a good time too. Bulldog was awesome. He was like a Bobby Hayes type guy. He'd been everywhere. Done jobs in the Fed, done jobs in WCW.
had a push in Memphis when WWF had a developmental deal there.
Yeah, he was a great guy, and then Bill wanted us to be heel, and it just wasn't working. So the fans turned us babyface. So then Bill was like, "Well, we need to turn one of y'all heel." So he turned Bulldog on me. We had the worst dog collar match ever because I won by disqualification.
That ended in a DQ, the only dog collar match in history.
And then a DQ, and I'm like, Bill, really? A DQ? I was like, just let him beat me. I don't care. I can't have you go under. I look at him. Bulldog's like, we're in the match, and he's like, this is fucking stupid. It was like a dog collar match with no blood, and I was like, okay, whatever. So I don't remember the finish, but I just know I won by disqualification.
Somebody ran in, I believe, with the finish. I still give Bill shit about that
Probably
finish
the dog,
to this
bro.
day. That's one of the things I
totally forgot. In between the Trash and Bulldog was Scotty Wren.
That's right, and you had a huge run with him, actually.
Dude, I wrestled Scotty Wren in front of like 20 people at the Wildside building one night. Worst goddamn match ever. Then we wrestled a match in Dawsonville, Georgia, in front of damn near 1,000 people. Second worst match ever. We just didn't click whatsoever. So Bill was like, "Well, we'll have y'all team up," and then we were on fire for about a year. Won the tag belts.
You had a good chemistry with Scott.
Yeah.
Really,
we wrestled a couple of guys from the Carolinas, Brad Anderson and what was that other guy's name?
Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. The name of the team was like Slam, Sex, Love, and Money.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think of the names. Brad Hunter,
I
think,
maybe
and Sean Alexander were their names. And sorry, forgive the kids screaming in the background. We're now old and parents and not like hanging out in a bar sipping cocktails like you would think to esteemed indie wrestling celebrities would be. That our kids are running around in the background raising hell, so if you hear them,
right.
it's fine.
But anyway, they brought them in, for the normal little 5-minute squash match, and they're like, give us more time than that. Bill's like, we only got this much time, and so Bill was like, give these guys, a little bit, and Scotty's like, fuck these guys. And they were just begging to do this one move where a guy shot me off and the other one did this flippy gimmick clothesline. I was like, all right, I'll take it. So they ring the bell and we do pretty much beat them up a little bit. They hit that spot. We're taking it home. And our finisher at the time was Scotty would shoot him in the corner. I'd run in, big forearm, shoot them into the Psycho Slam. Well, I caught that Hunter kid with a pretty vicious forearm and didn't mean to do it. It was a total accident. We get in the back and his chin's moved over about 4 inches one way. And I'm like, ugh. So I'm like, man, you all right? And he couldn't talk because I'd broken his jaw. Oops. And I patted him on the head and I was like, you'll be all right, kid. Went in the office and then that was the end of that. But me and Scotty, we had good chemistry. And then he was one that would kind of fade off.
Yeah, he was an in and out guy. He'd come in, do a run, and then disappear for a while and come back.
That was my heel turn, was on him. They finally turned me heel, and they brought JC Daz back. So me and Bulldog started teaming up, and we did the match where it was the street fight, and New Jack was getting drugged behind the truck.
I remember that.
And I remember driving down the road, and Bulldog had gotten like the best color I'd ever seen in that building, and he had a big clot, and it was just dangling, and I threw up on the way to the goddamn building back. And I was like, you gotta get that shit off your head. And he's like, what? He turned around. It was just kind of sliming around, and like the wind was hitting it. It looked like a flag on his head. I started puking.
Do you remember the Iceberg promo with the blood clot?
When he ate the blood clot, Hernandez threw up. He's like, yeah, this is what I think of you. And you hear Hernandez.
Yeah, that was only in wrestling will you see a man eat a blood clot for a television promo.
I remember I cut a promo one night and this big ass cricket or something flew on my shirt. and I smashed it and I ate it. And Bailey was like, "God damn, that's just nasty." I was like, "God damn." He's like, "I'm not gonna use that." I'm like, "That was fucking awesome." He's like, "Fuck you, it was gross." Because I don't want to edit that shit. And then I got to do like some matches with Jason Cross and David Young put me over like $1 million one night. Rick Michaels, and people like to give him a lot of shit. Me and Rick have always been cool.
He's a good worker, man.
He
Say what you will about anything else, but he's a fantastic worker.
He was always awesome. You know, I was a nobody. I'd been in there in the Wildside a couple of months and wrestled him, and you know, it was the title match, and he made it believable that I was going to beat him for the title.
I remember that. I also remember Terry Knight, the very next TV, trying to do the same match to, you know, continue to build your push, and he didn't want to fucking sell or bump for you.
Yeah.
Rick, the heavyweight champion, the superstar, is just flipping and flopping all over the building for you.
Yeah, Terry Knight's all like, "I'm not bumping for this guy." But you know what? He bumped, though. You know, I'd heard stories about him. He's an old school guy. He was a cool guy. You know, he was the one that got caught on fire that night, and we all freaked out about.
Oh, God, yeah.
That was at the first big show that I did, Freedom Fight. Me and Trash worked, JC North and Lance Dreamer.
Delicious Dreams.
Delicious Dreams. And I fucked up twice in that match. The first spot, I threw Dreamer through the barricade. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to get fired my first night in. JC North comes off with a dive. The man Trash catch him and do a double follow-away slam about 4 rows into the crowd. And Bill's is livid. I'm like, man, those people didn't care. They thought it was awesome.
And Trash knocked JC North completely out with that stop sign.
And then I gave him the F-bomb right on his head.
That was a rough one.
Another match that was I always thought was funny. What was the fucking Goth and Psycho?
Johnny Psycho. Ink.
And I gave Psycho the F-bomb, and he was so oiled up I couldn't hold on to him, and he legit landed on his head. And people were like, "Man, this son of a bitch is killing people with his move. I ain't taking that shit."
That was a common phrase heard around 2001, 2002.
Yeah.
In the Wildside locker room was F-bomb.
Yeah.
I ain't taking that shit.
They're like, "What's the F-bomb?" And I'd explain it to them, and they were like, "Fuck that."
But then you also had AJ Styles and Jason Cross just killing each other. Like fucking brain busters off the top rope and fucking, you know, reverse hurricane ranas off the fucking balconies. And yeah, it was a pretty wild time.
Yeah, there was just so many guys that come through there that I got to work with. Like I said, Cross, Adam Jacobs. He was like my best friend at the time, and he was my traveling partner. We had so much fun. It was me, him, this guy named David Pierce was our videotaping guy, and my wife now, Kim. And it was just like, we were like the 4 horsemen. I mean, she was just one of the boys. I mean, damn, she'd raise hell. She'd cuss motherfucker out. She'd put a dip in and spit right in your eye. She didn't give a fuck. One night we're doing this 8-man tag, and my buddy Pierce has had like 107 Xanax, so he can barely keep his head up. And on the tape, you see him with, you know, he's got the ring in the viewfinder, and then it starts drifting off to the floor, and you hear my wife say, "You better wake up. They're gonna be madder than fuck." So yeah, it was. We did so much shit on the road. Locked Pierce in a bathroom. Put gum in Adam Jacobs' ear when he was asleep. Shaving cream. It was always fun times. It was always, because you knew you weren't gonna make no money, so we just made the most out of it on the trips down there and home.
Now, what's that story about Jason Cross and a straw? Yeah. Tell that story. That was a favorite.
It was Cybernaro, Jimmy Rave, Jason Cross, and myself coming back from Philadelphia. And Cross had been crying for about 3 hours to stop and get something to eat. So we stop at a Wendy's. And we get our food, and we're eating and having our merry way. And then he gets on the phone with his girlfriend. So I take an extra straw, and I shove it up my ass. And I point my ass up in front. Sal and Jimmy are up front. I'm like, "Hey, you guys want a sip?" They're like, "Oh, you nasty motherfucker." So I'm like, "Oh, ha, ha, ha." And Jason's all like, "Hey, Tank just had this straw on his ass." And he's over talking, "Oh, I love you, baby. I love you." And while he's talking, I switched the straw out of his drink to the ass straw. with the end that was in my ass up front. So when he took a drink, so he take the sip out of it, and I'm just back there dying. I ain't told anybody. We stop somewhere, and I tell Jimmy and Sal, and they're like, "Oh my God, that's great. Let's just don't tell him." So this went on for a year and a half without us ever telling him. And one night I finally just blurted it out. You remember that time I had that? Yeah. And he goes, I go, "Well, when you were on the phone, I switched the straws." He's like, "No, you didn't." "Yeah, you did." He goes, "I always thought that straw smelled funny." I was like, he goes, "I tasted your butt."
Oh, man.
There's also the trip. It was Sal, Cross, David Young, Iceberg, Jimmy Rave, AJ Styles, all of us in one hotel room. And Styles and Sal had already broken one of the beds. So somebody was going to have to pay for that shit. And me and Iceberg, our big asses, both got in a queen size bed and slept and never touched the whole time. And Jimmy Rave was sleeping like on the windowsill. It was just wide enough for somebody to sleep on or sit on. And I believe Sal poured water in his face, and he woke up thinking he was drowning. And I had a dream I was drowning. Well, no, motherfucker, he just poured water in your face. And my first trip to Philly, we if anybody knows me, knows I'm narcoleptic like a motherfucker. I will go to sleep in a heartbeat. And I was telling a story about something, eating a Slim Jim. And Jimmy and Iceberg are in the front, and they're like, "Man, this is a pretty interesting story." And then the story just stopped. I fell asleep with a Slim Jim hanging out of my mouth. And woke up like 2 hours later and finished the story. And they were just like, "Dude, that was the most amazing shit I've ever seen."
I've been witness to one of
Yeah, I would go to sleep.
Many hours on the road. Got a question coming in on Twitter from your former tag team partner, White Trash.
Oh, yes.
He says, when pitting Corey Chavis for the Wildside Tag Team titles in 2001, why did you cop a feel in his nuts? Unique way to win.
Just felt like the thing to do.
Good to hear from White Trash. And Wicked Nemesis on Twitter asks, who was your favorite opponent in the entire run of Wildside?
Iceberg.
That makes sense.
It had to be Iceberg. I mean, they brought him in. He killed Trash off. And then everything led to me and him. And we did the big cage match. The flaming bat. You know, we did some crazy shit. And, working Iceberg was awesome. I mean, it was like working my twin. You know, and like I always said he was so much better than me, and he would turn around and say, "No, you're better than me." No, we were both pretty fucking good. You know, I don't care what anybody says. For two big guys, you know, we worked a show with Dusty, and Dusty, you know, told us, you know, if I'd have had y'all in '85 against the Road Warriors, we'd have made a shitload of money.
Yeah, I heard that from a few veterans.
He's just like, you know, not just, he goes, "Y'all are different." He goes, "Y'all are big, heavy guys." He goes, "Hell, we had the Zambui Express. We didn't make money with them." You know, he's like, "But I think I'd have made money with y'all because y'all know how y'all can move and this and that."
Well, you could always create the movement, but you were so damned imposing and intimidating, and people were really afraid of you, especially when you first hit a territory, like, I mean, Wildside or wherever, but, you know, you didn't stay around long enough to where because eventually you're always turned babyface, because guys that big that can do what you guys do, eventually it just earns the respect of the fans, and, you know, so you can have a good long run as a heel, but eventually you're going babyface. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, and so you can create the movement, but you're always so, like, legitimately intimidating. Actually, our guest last week, the Confederate Mac, I remember him saying that one time he was afraid of you. He thought you could whip a man's ass in a fight, and thought that you probably wouldn't have no bones doing so.
Well, that was always a good compliment.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you're trying to achieve, so.
You know, yeah, I mean, if I have people believe I can beat somebody's ass, then I've done my job. And it's like now, like I said, I did that show in Red Bank, and they were like, you know, "We want you to be a heel." And I was like, okay. So I go out, and I'm trying to heel, but half the crowd was the crowd from Saudi Daisy when I was the big baby face. It just didn't work. You know, I'm trying, and even as a baby face, I still cheat. I will choke you. You know, I still work as a heel as a babyface.
Well, you're just Tank. You know, you have your own style that's been perfected and crafted over well over a decade, almost 20 years now, and so there's really not it's like a Hogan or an Austin or that type of character. You know, the strong style psycho is just a badass, and it's kind of hard for you not to be a badass at 375 with the giant beard and the big taped fists. You know, nobody's expecting you to play chicken shit, even though, as any good worker can, you know when to turn it on like a crazy person and back it up like a chicken shit, as the old saying goes.
And then when it was me and Iceberg together, I mean, we were unbeatable, especially at Wildside. We're like, who the hell's going to beat us? And then Bill wanted to put the belts on Pomp and Circumstance, which was Sean Tempers and Ace Rockwell.
And you killed those poor fucking guys.
And it was just like, you know, I was like, Bill, really? You know, I love them to death. They're my boys, you know. And, you know, if it wasn't for me and you, they'd probably still be wrestling in some goddamn garage in Rome, Georgia. And I was like, I didn't want to do business. That was the first time I'd ever, like, I was like, I ain't doing this shit. And Berg was like, oh, we can make it work. So we did a run-in with like 20 people. So, yeah, man, it made sense. And then when we win the belts back, we just destroy them. That Hardcore Hell was like a 20-minute squash match. And Bill's like, God damn, quit beating them up. And we, me and Berg, we had a good run. And then when we formed the Rejects, it was always weird. It was like when me and Berg were teaming, we would get cheered. Like Ace Rockwell was top babyface. We'd kill him. And the crowd would cheer one more time or this or that. And then when Izzy and Tempers were out there, they get booed. But like if it was an 8-man, whenever me and Berg were in there, kill him. Tempers, Izzy, boo, boo. You know, it was just kind of weird. You know, because we were the big heel faction and we were killing people off.
Yeah,
they still love the shit out of it.
They love seeing the destruction for sure. I would argue a little bit with that I think overall we still had just so much heat. It was, I mean, goddamn, I got attacked a couple of times. You know, we had the heat out there, but I just think we also had that presence. You know that it was just hard to ignore.
Oh yeah, we had. The other night we killed Jerry Palmer and motherfuckers followed him to the hospital.
Yeah, that's still a crowning achievement in my career. But going back, Wildside, you pretty much covered all of your various careers or stages there, various time periods, you know, different partners and what have you. In 2005, it all ended. Bill took a job with WWE and the Wildside brand closed down. Just, you know, what were you feeling there at the night of last rites when it was all coming to an end?
Well, it was sad. You know, I'd been going there for so long. We weren't real sure. We had heard Jerry Palmer was going to buy the company or whatever, and we'd start back up. And then there was a part of me that was like, I ain't going back. And that last night, you know, we had the big boohoo fest in the cage, and you know, it was sad, but then, you know, 3 weeks later, Anarchy started.
Yeah, so you didn't have long to be sad.
I'd actually gotten hurt between those 3 weeks. I hurt my knee, and so kind of put a kibosh on what we had planned for me. But then Al Getz was helping with the booking. I believe you were. Or no, you weren't back yet.
I was gone. I was off on hiatus, playing in a metal band. It was you that fucking brought. I was done too. I was like,
yeah, you would quit. And we were like, fuck it. And then I was the commissioner, and I was like the Stone Cold commissioner. I'd come out and I'd beat up baby faces and help the babies win, or beat up heels and help the baby faces win. It was a good little deal. And then they were like, man, we gotta get you back in the ring. I was like, man, I'm having fun doing this, you know. So then they did a deal with Scotty Wren where he was hearing voices. And I was like, told Getz, I was like, it's Dan talking to him. Ah, damn, that's great. And that was kind of like the birth of the Rejects, is that Scotty Wren never stuck around to do it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So we were like, well, shit, what the hell are we going to do now? Because we were going to do it with him. And he was just gonna be crazy as shit, and then he disappears. So I was like,
well, yeah, the Reverend never would have been
No.
born at all had it not been for that particular spot, because I was an announcer, and I'd done some managing like way when I first started, and I fucking sucked, and I was terrible, didn't know what I was doing, but during the time I was an announcer, I had the fortunate time to spend just weeks and hours and hours and hours with Jeff G. Bailey, and he would just fill my head with knowledge about the business, about managing, about just the whole art of psychology. And so I got a first-class education from him, and by the time you were like, hey, come back as a manager, I said, fuck, why not? And had it not been for Tank, there would be no Reverend, there would be no Midnight Black Mass. I'd either be a retired announcer or an active announcer again, and maybe I will be again one day, but right now I'm enjoying doing this. But so Wildside ended, Anarchy started, the Rejects thing had a good run, and God, we ran that probably from 2005 to 2008, 2010.
I left in 2007 when I moved up north.
Mm-hmm.
And then came back for that match with Judas. And then when I came back in 2009, the Rejects were still around. And I came back to save Iceberg. And then I turned on him so we could do our shit all over again. And did the War Games. And I got really drunk and got fired.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. But then you did come back for the Tempers, where we split the Rejects up finally in Anarchy.
After I'd gotten released or whatever. Let me tell the story on getting the drunk.
Yeah, sure.
All right, they had some Jaeger back there. Clinton brought it. And Bailey kept telling him, keep the Jaeger away from Tank.
Whatever you do.
So Bailey went to manage a match, and then the 20 minutes he was gone, I had like 13 or 14 shots. So I was pretty much hammered. And Bailey gets back there and is like, God damn it. Who gave him the Jaeger? Everybody's like, ooh. So we go out there, we do the match, and Ace Rockwell wanted to give me an airplane spin. So he spins me around, I'm trying to puke. So we do that. He puts me down. I'm all dizzy and shit. We set the table up. Judas gives Berg the El Crucifixio shit on top of me. He squashes me, and I'm laying there like, oh, okay. We take it home. I stumble out of the cage, and I take a bump over the rail into the crowd. And I'm bleeding, and that's when all that Georgia commission shit was going around. They were freaking out. Oh, goddamn. So Ace Rockwell comes over there and gives me a shoot hip toss over the rail onto my head. And if you ever watch the tape, you see I stand straight up and I try to punch him in the face as hard as I can. And he's like, oh shit. So he takes off running. And then that was a Saturday, and then I got a phone call from you saying, Bill wants to get rid of you for a while. And I thought it was bullshit. And on that same day, my mother passed away.
Yeah, that shit sucked. Let me tell you right now, I was a booker at that time.
Yeah.
That shit fucking sucked. That's the shitty part of having to work in the office, and really the last time I've ever been interested in
I didn't even know that my
anything.
mama passed away. You gave me that news, and I was like, well, whatever. Then my dad called me 15 minutes later because I'm coming back from Ohio to Chattanooga saying, that my mom had died. And I'm like, what the hell? So I'm thinking, well, this is kind of shitty. So then I was thinking, wrestling, Jerry Palmer booked me again for the next show. He was like, Tank needs wrestling. We're his family, blah, blah, blah. And Bill's like, no. So I was like, well, fuck you. I was like, well, fuck it then. And, then a couple months later, they called me back. You ready to do this spot with Tempers? I was like, yeah, sure. So we did. That shit was funny. Tempers being the leader. I'm the veteran. And he's telling me what to do. And then we had that kick-ass match, the fucking compound death match where I hit you in the nuts with a shovel with a big center block on your cods. And
yeah, that hurt.
And, we just went from there. And, the difference between Wildside and Anarchy, Wildside to me, we were a family. Anarchy was we were just there to be there. There was no really camaraderie between us all. You know what I'm saying?
I think there was, from the time that the Reject shit got hot.
When I came back in 2009, it was...
No. Yeah, I'm talking about, from when we first got Anarchy hot and drew bigger houses than we ever did at Wildside. We fucking went to those two theaters in Helen, Georgia, and put like 500 in there the first time. We came back and put almost 1,000 in there. And then we went to the Georgia Mountain Center and put almost 1,000 in there. With just our own shit, that's how hot it was at the time. And I think that, it was, but I think once Jerry, he had a kid and the kid had some health problems, so of course anybody, you can't blame him, it's going to distract you. And once that happened, it just kind of started becoming more of a business. And not that it shouldn't have always been a business, but at least at that time, I think, like you said, the camaraderie started kind of dissipating.
It was just kind of like, I'm like, well, I don't know if I want to go back. I was going to do this shit with Tempers. And I was like, hell, I'm going to be done for a while. And then they brought up, well, we're going to put the Anarchy title on you. And I'm thinking, I was like, well, that's cool, but you're about 8 years too goddamn late. So that night when I won the belt, it was cool, but then again, I was kind of like, who gave a shit, Because I should have had a run when it was Wildside.
I thought so.
Maybe to be a transitional guy, to have me win it for a couple of weeks and I'll drop it to somebody. I wouldn't care. Just to say that I was one, a Wildside champion, I was Anarchy champion with a fucking replica belt. I didn't give a shit,
Yeah. Well, I think the original Anarchy title got stolen or something, didn't they? But they had signed that contract with a company to make replicas of the Anarchy title. It was a really nice looking belt, but they did indeed have to use a replica belt for a while because that belt got hijacked by somebody.
And I beat Judas for the belt. That was the night he gave me that goddamn gimmick about kill me. I was like, brother, I've seen you do it to Iceberg. Just walk out and drop me. He goes, all right, man, no problem. Now he threw me from corner to corner. I'm like, good God.
Yeah, that is
strong
a
bastard.
Strong motherfucker. You're Michael
I was just
Judas.
like, you big strong bastard. And I tried to stand up, and I can't because I just felt like my back was just totally out of whack. I was like, okay, I'm done. Just pin me. So we do that, and then at the time, my family lived in Ohio, so we were running 2 shows a month, and one of the shows we were running was right before Christmas, and I told Bill months before I was going to Ohio. He's like, no, you need to be here. I was like, oh, I can't. And then I don't show up, and Andy Alexander sends me a text saying, Seven's the champion now. I'm like, what? I was like, okay. And then, Palmer was fixing to sell, and we got to, Hardcore Hell, I guess, or whatever show that was. I didn't come back, and I still had the belt and everything. I was like, oh, fuck them. I'll send it back in pieces. And we come back, and I did a 6-man tag. It was just thrown together, and I did tell them that was going to be my last show there because I'd done dealt with 2 owners. I didn't want to deal with a third one. I don't know Franklin that well. I was like, I'm done. So I did that match, and I ain't been back since.
To his credit, Franklin Dove's a good guy. I had a little bit of a run down there after you left. We did a crazy babyface thing, which that was really the first time that ever did it down there, but it kind of transitioned to other places too. And did the deal with the Hate Junkies. That was like my last cool original creation as a gimmick deal, and then I left too. Love those guys and wish them all the best, but I can't do that regularly anymore. The drive is hell, and like a lot of people are like, well, if you fucking been on the indies for 10 years and you ain't got a fucking deal, you might as well quit. Well, fucking maybe I should, but I'm not fucking smart enough to.
But I'm not gonna quit.
Still smarter than to have to do that. When I got more important things at home. I got a kid now.
Well, the same thing here. Me and my wife, we just, we had lived in a duplex next to my dad forever. Now we just bought a house. And I can't, go out and spend $80 to go down there to make 10.
Yeah. Yeah,
we got
can't do it.
$800 house payment. We got a car payment. We got cable. We got everything. I was like,
it's irresponsible as an adult and a man to do that when you can't. when you can't make it work. And the guys like us, we've been at it so long, you know, if we're not making money, to me at this point, if I'm not bringing home money, it's not worth it to me. It's so much easier to sit on my fat fucking ass at home and read comic books and do podcasts. So
now we work at Empire Wrestling, which is in Rossville, Georgia, and it's 20 minutes from the house, and I make probably double what I'd make driving to goddamn Cornelia. So, and when I'm back home by midnight.
Yeah, and like make keyword like I mean, not everybody's like, oh, Anarchy Wildside, they don't pay them. That was always a bullshit, by the way. And like, if you were a guy, you get paid. It just wasn't very good. That's the thing. It was the old Jerry Jarrett payoff.
But if it wasn't for Wildside, I'd have been stuck in goddamn Dalton, Georgia. I mean, because then bookers were getting a hold of Bill wanting to use me on their shows, like guys from New Jersey and Michigan and Florida and Texas. And, I did a lot of traveling then. It was like, well, this is pretty cool. And so I owe a lot to Bill and Wildside and Anarchy. And, Bill got me my deal at IWA-Mid South. I started going up there. I mean, I actually called Ian, and Ian called Bill. It was like, is this guy legit? And Bill was like, yeah, you'll like him. And went up there and wrestled for him for a few years when I moved up that way. I mean, we did the angle where I got hurt, and then the next week I'm doing a deathmatch tournament.
Well, yeah, and I definitely want to talk about that and a little more. I believe right now we're going to pause it for, go ahead and wrap up part one. And this will be a good stopping point for this interview. But the recording will continue, folks, and we'll have part two right here next week on the Midnight Black Mass. What I want to focus on here in part two is, like you said, your travels elsewhere, kind of reflections on the business overall. And just a lot of road stories. We still got a couple more fan questions coming in, so we'll address those as well next week. But it has been awesome. I think we've covered the Wildside part of things appropriately, so it's a good time to end it here. And then just any final words this week?
I got a lot of more shit to tell you next week.
All right, awesome. Well, we'll see you then. Keep one foot in the gutter, one fist in the goal. This is the Rave. I'm out.